Gareth Ashford's hands were steady as he knelt in the trampled grass, examining the blood trail that led into the forest. But his heart hammered against his ribs because this was orc blood, and following it meant crossing into territory where humans were killed on sight. He was a veteran of the border wars, 26 years old with scars that mapped every battle he had survived, and he knew the smell of orc blood differently than human blood because he had spilled enough of both to last 3 lifetimes. The war had ended 2 years ago with a tenuous peace treaty, but hatred on both sides still burned hot as forge coals. Gareth had retired to his late father's homestead on the frontier, a modest farmstead with fields of wheat and a small barn, hoping to leave violence behind. But the blood trail started at his property line, and whatever had been wounded had stumbled through his wheat field before disappearing into the trees. He should ignore it. Let whatever orc warrior had been injured crawl away to die or recover on their own. That was the smart choice, the safe choice. But Gareth had seen enough death, and something in him rebelled at the thought of leaving any creature to suffer alone in the wilderness, even an orc. The forest swallowed him as he followed the trail deeper, his hunting knife at his belt and a leather satchel of basic medical supplies over his shoulder. He had served as a field medic during the war, patching up soldiers when the real healers were overwhelmed. The blood drops were larger now, more frequent, and Gareth quickened his pace despite the warning voice in his head that screamed he was a fool. He found her collapsed against a massive oak tree, her green skin pale with blood loss, her leather armor torn and soaked with dark crimson. She was young, maybe 20 or 21, with short black hair that stuck to her forehead with sweat. Small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, and her pointed ears were pressed back against her skull in pain. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow and rapid. Gareth approached slowly, knowing that even an injured orc could be deadly. He had seen orc warriors fight through wounds that would have killed human soldiers twice over. But she did not stir as he knelt beside her, and when he pressed his fingers to her throat, her pulse was thready and weak. The wound was in her side, a deep gash that looked like it had come from a blade or possibly a wild animal. It was still bleeding, and infection was already setting in based on the redness around the edges. She would die here if he left her, probably within hours. Gareth cursed under his breath and began unpacking his supplies. He had seen orc and human bodies piled together on battlefields, and he had sworn he was done with all of it. But he could not walk away. He cleaned the wound with water from his canteen, applied a poultice of herbs that would fight infection, and bound it tightly with clean linen strips. The orc woman did not wake during any of it, which worried him more than if she had fought him. He could not leave her here, but he also could not carry her all the way back to his farmstead. She was tall and muscular, easily his height and probably close to his weight. So Gareth did the only thing he could think of. He gathered fallen branches and his cloak to make her more comfortable, left his canteen beside her, and ran back to his farm to get his horse and a travois. The sun was setting by the time he returned, and he half expected to find her dead or gone. Instead, she was awake, her eyes open and watching him with a mixture of confusion and wariness. They were golden brown, like honey in sunlight, and they tracked his every movement as he approached. "I am not going to hurt you," Gareth said, keeping his voice low and calm. "You are badly wounded. I have treated the injury, but you need rest and shelter. Will you let me take you somewhere safe?" The orc woman stared at him for a long moment, and he could see the war happening behind her eyes. Trust or fight, accept help or die alone. Finally, she gave a tiny nod. Getting her onto the travois was an ordeal that left them both shaking and exhausted, but Gareth managed it. He led his horse slowly through the forest, glancing back every few steps to make sure she had not passed out again. By the time they reached his farmstead, full dark had fallen, and the moon was rising over the fields. Gareth could not bring her into his house. If anyone from the nearby village saw an orc in his home, they would burn the place down with both of them inside. So he settled her in his barn, in a clean stall that he filled with fresh straw and blankets. He brought her water, bread, and some dried meat, though she only managed a few sips of water before exhaustion claimed her again. For 3 days, Gareth tended to her in secret. He changed her bandages twice daily, brought her food and water, and kept watch to make sure no one from the village came snooping. The orc woman, whose name he still did not know, drifted in and out of consciousness. When she was awake, she watched him with those unsettling golden eyes but said nothing. On the 4th day, when Gareth came into the barn with fresh bandages and a pot of stew, she spoke for the first time. "Why are you doing this?" Her voice was rough from disuse, deeper than a human woman's voice but not unpleasant. There was genuine confusion in the question, as if kindness from a human was incomprehensible. Gareth set down the pot and knelt beside her. "Because you needed help and I could give it. I am an orc. You are human. We are enemies. The war is over," Gareth said quietly, "and I have had enough of enemies." She studied him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. Not quite trust, but perhaps the beginning of it. "My name is Henna Zalgrim. Gareth Ashford, this is my farm." "You are a farmer." There was surprise in her voice, and her eyes traced the scars on his forearms where his sleeves were rolled up. "Now I am. Before I was a soldier, a medic mostly, but I fought when I had to." Henna nodded slowly as if that explained something. "I was a scout. I was tracking a group of human raiders who have been attacking orc settlements along the border when they ambushed me. I killed 2, but the 3rd got away and I was wounded." "The treaty is supposed to prevent that," Gareth said, anger flickering in his chest. There were always those who could not let go of the hate, who wanted the war to continue forever. "Treaties are words on paper. Hate is in the blood." Henna's voice was bitter, and Gareth could not argue with her. He helped her sit up so she could eat the stew, and though her hands shook, she managed it. She was stronger than she had been even a day ago, and Gareth felt some of the tension in his shoulders ease. She was going to survive. Over the next week, Henna's strength returned in increments. She could sit up without help, then stand for short periods, then walk a few steps before needing to rest. Gareth continued to bring her meals and tend to her wound, which was healing cleanly thanks to the herbs and constant care. They talked in short bursts, conversations that started awkward and stilted but gradually became easier. Gareth learned that Henna had been cast out of her clan 3 years ago for refusing to kill a human child during a raid. She had been living alone in the wilderness ever since, taking odd jobs as a scout or guard for orc settlements that would tolerate an outcast. She had no family, no home to return to. Henna learned that Gareth had lost his entire family to a plague that swept through his village when he was 16. He had joined the army because he had nowhere else to go and nothing else to lose. He had been good at healing, less good at killing, and when the war ended, he had taken his inheritance and tried to build a life worth living. "You are lonely," Henna said one evening as Gareth sat beside her, mending one of her leather straps that had torn during her injury. It was not a question. Gareth's hand stilled. "Yes, I suppose I am. So am I." Her voice was soft, almost vulnerable, and when Gareth looked up, her golden eyes were fixed on him with an intensity that made his breath catch. He did not know what to say to that, so he simply nodded and went back to his mending. But something had shifted between them, a recognition of shared wounds that went deeper than flesh. By the end of the 2nd week, Henna was strong enough to leave the barn and walk around the farmstead, though she stayed out of sight of the road. Gareth's nearest neighbor was half a mile away, and the village was 3 miles distant, but he could not afford to be careless. If anyone discovered he was harboring an orc, it would mean death for both of them. Henna helped where she could, mucking out the stalls and feeding the chickens, simple tasks that did not strain her healing side. Gareth found himself looking forward to the evenings when they would sit together in the barn, sharing a meal and talking about everything and nothing. She had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard, and a laugh that was low and genuine when he managed to earn it. It was dangerous, what they were building. Gareth knew it, and he suspected Henna did too, but neither of them pulled away. 3 weeks after Gareth had found her in the forest, Henna's wound was fully healed, leaving only a pale scar on her green skin. She was strong again, capable of traveling if she chose. Gareth knew he should tell her it was time to leave, that staying any longer increased the risk for both of them. But he could not bring himself to say the words. Instead, Henna said them first. "I should go," she said one evening as they sat together on a log behind the barn, watching the sun set over the wheat fields. "You have done more than enough for me, more than anyone has ever done. But if I stay, I will bring danger to you." Gareth's chest tightened. "Where will you go? North, maybe. There are orc clans in the mountains who are more tolerant of outcasts, or perhaps I will keep wandering. I have become good at it." "You could stay," Gareth said before he could stop himself. "I have plenty of space and the barn is comfortable. You could help with the farm and I could use the extra hands during harvest." Henna turned to look at him, and in the fading light her eyes were luminous. "Why would you risk that?" "Because I do not want you to go." The words came out raw and honest, and Gareth saw her breath hitch. "You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you are brave and strong and kinder than you pretend to be. I know you make me laugh, and I have not laughed in years. I know that this place feels less empty with you in it." Henna looked away, her jaw tight. "Gareth, I am an orc. You are human. Even if the world did not hate us for it, even if it was not dangerous, it would never work." "Why not?" Gareth asked, and his voice was steady despite the fear churning in his gut. "Because you deserve someone who will not ruin your life just by existing in it. Because every moment I stay puts you at risk. Because—" Her voice broke, and she stopped. Gareth reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. Her skin was warm and rough with calluses, her fingers strong. "Because you are afraid." "Yes," Henna whispered, and there was so much pain in that single word that Gareth's heart ached. "So am I," he admitted. "But I am more afraid of letting you walk away and spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been." They sat in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared. Henna did not pull her hand away, and Gareth counted that as a victory. "1 month," Henna said finally. "Let me stay for 1 month. If it becomes too dangerous or if you change your mind, I will leave. No arguments." "Agreed," Gareth said, relief flooding through him. 1 month was not forever, but it was something. Henna stayed in the barn, and life on the farm took on a new rhythm. She rose with the sun and helped Gareth with the chores. She was stronger than him, able to lift bales of hay and sacks of grain that would have taken him 2 trips. She learned to milk the cow, though she complained the creature was stubborn and uncooperative. Gareth taught her to make bread, and though her first few attempts were dense enough to use as weapons, she eventually got the hang of it. In the evenings, they would sit together and talk, or sometimes just sit in comfortable silence. Gareth taught Henna to read using an old book of folk tales his mother had loved. Henna taught Gareth some of the orc language, laughing at his terrible pronunciation. They were small intimacies, building something fragile and precious between them. Gareth found himself watching her when she was not looking, noticing the way the sunlight caught in her black hair, the strength in her movements, the rare smiles that transformed her entire face. He was falling for her, and it terrified him. The month passed too quickly, and as the end approached, Gareth's anxiety grew. He did not mention the deadline, and neither did Henna, but it hung between them like a sword. On what should have been her last night, Gareth brought a bottle of honey wine to the barn, something he had been saving for a special occasion. They sat together on the straw, passing the bottle back and forth, and the alcohol loosened tongues. "I do not want to leave," Henna said, staring at the bottle in her hands. "I know I should, but I do not want to." "Then do not leave," Gareth said. "Stay, not for another month, stay for as long as you want." "It is not that simple." "Why not? We are both adults. This is my land." "Who is going to stop us?" Henna looked at him, and there was anguish in her eyes. "Gareth, do you understand what you are asking? If people find out, they will not just drive me away. They will kill you. They will burn your farm and salt your fields and make an example of you. I cannot let that happen." "That is my choice to make," Gareth said firmly. "I know the risks, and I am choosing this. I am choosing you." "Why?" The word was almost a sob. "Because I love you." The confession hung in the air between them, and Gareth saw Henna's eyes go wide. "I know it is fast, and I know it is complicated, but it is true. I love you, Henna. I love your strength and your humor and the way you hum while you work. I love the way you get frustrated with the cow and the way you smile when you think I am not looking. I love you, and I want you to stay. Not because I pity you or because I am lonely, but because you have become the most important person in my world." Henna was shaking, and when Gareth reached out to touch her arm, he felt tremors running through her whole body. "No one has ever," she stopped, swallowed hard, and tried again. "No one has ever said anything like that to me." "Then they were fools," Gareth said, and he meant it. Henna made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to be loved or how to love someone back. I was cast out so young, and before that, orc clans do not, we do not." She was struggling for words, her usual composure cracking. "Then we will figure it out together," Gareth said gently. He moved closer slowly, and when she did not pull away, he wrapped his arms around her. Henna went rigid at first, every muscle locked, and Gareth almost released her. But then she made a small, broken sound, and her body went limp against his. She was shaking harder now, great shudders that racked her whole frame, and Gareth realized with a shock that she was crying. He held her tighter, one hand on her back and the other cradling her head, and let her fall apart. It took a long time for the tears to subside, and when they finally did, Henna's voice was muffled against his shoulder. "No one has held me since I was a small child. Before I was old enough to train as a warrior. Orcs do not, we are not raised with softness. And after I was cast out," she stopped, and Gareth felt fresh tears soak through his shirt. "I have you now," Gareth whispered. "I have you, and I am not letting go." They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped around each other in the dim barn with only the sounds of the animals and the night wind for company. When Henna finally pulled back, her eyes were red and her face was blotchy, and Gareth thought she had never looked more beautiful. "I love you too," Henna said, and her voice was rough but certain. "I did not want to admit it even to myself, but I do. I love you, Gareth Ashford, and it terrifies me." Gareth smiled and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. "Good. We can be terrified together." Henna laughed, a real laugh, and then she kissed him. It was awkward at first, their tusks an obstacle Gareth had not anticipated, but they adjusted, and then it was sweet and perfect and everything he had been too afraid to hope for. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Henna rested her forehead against his. "What do we do now?" "We live," Gareth said simply. We work the farm and build a life and deal with problems as they come, together. Together, Henna echoed, and it sounded like a vow. The next morning, Gareth made a decision. He could not keep Henna hidden forever, and living in fear was no way to live. So he told her his plan, and though she argued at first, she eventually agreed it was the only way forward. They would go to the village together. They would be honest about who she was and what she meant to him, and they would deal with whatever came after. The village of Thornhaven was small, maybe 300 people, clustered around a central square with a market and a tavern and a church. Gareth knew everyone who lived there, had grown up with many of them, and that made what he was about to do both easier and harder. He and Henna walked into the square side by side, and the effect was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Children stared. Several people reached for weapons that were not there. The village elder, a grizzled man named Tam Brennan, stepped forward. His face was hard, but he did not draw the sword at his hip. "Gareth, what is the meaning of this?" "This is Henna Zalgrim," Gareth said, keeping his voice steady. "She was wounded and I helped her. She has been staying on my farm while she recovered. She means no harm to anyone here." "She is an orc," Tam said flatly. "The war may be over, but that does not mean we trust them." "I am not asking you to trust all orcs," Gareth replied. "I am asking you to trust me. I served this village, I fought to protect it, and I am telling you that Henna is not your enemy." A woman in the crowd spoke up, her voice sharp. "You fought in the war, Gareth. You know what they did to us. You know how many of our people they killed. How can you stand there with one of them and ask us to accept it?" "Because I also know what we did to them," Gareth said, and his voice was hard now. "I saw orc villages burned, orc children left orphaned, orc elders murdered in their homes. Both sides committed atrocities. Both sides lost people they loved. The war is over because someone has to be the first to let go of the hate, or it will never end." Tam studied him for a long moment, then looked at Henna. "You have been on Gareth's farm for how long?" "6 weeks, Henna said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "And in that time have you harmed anyone, stolen anything, caused any trouble?" "No." "She has helped me work the farm," Gareth added. "She has repaired fences, tended animals, and done honest labor. She has been nothing but respectful." The crowd was murmuring now, a mix of anger and uncertainty. Tam held up a hand for silence. "The treaty allows for peaceful coexistence, even if it does not encourage it. As long as this orc Henna follows our laws and causes no harm, I see no reason to take action." "But Gareth, you will be responsible for her. If she steps out of line, it falls on you." "I understand," Gareth said, relief washing through him. "Thank you, Tam." "Do not thank me yet," Tam said grimly. "Not everyone is going to be as reasonable." He was right. Over the following weeks, Gareth and Henna faced hostility from some of the villagers. People crossed the street to avoid them. Mothers pulled their children inside when they approached. Someone threw a rock through Gareth's window with a note tied to it that called him a traitor. But there were also those who were kind, or at least neutral. The blacksmith, a burly man named Joran, sold them supplies without comment. The herbalist, an older woman named Mira, invited Henna to learn about local plants and shared recipes for healing poultices. A young couple who ran the bakery started saving day-old bread for them at a discount. Slowly, grudgingly, the village began to accept Henna's presence. It helped that she was unfailingly polite and worked harder than anyone else. When a barn on the edge of the village caught fire, Henna was the first one there, hauling water and helping to save the livestock. When a child fell into the river, Henna dove in without hesitation and pulled the boy to safety. Action spoke louder than words, and Henna's action spoke of honor and courage. 6 months after Henna had first come to Gareth's farm, They stood together in the wheat field under a sky full of stars. The harvest had been good, and the farm was thriving. Henna had moved from the barn into the house, and though Gareth had worried about what people would think, no one said anything. "Are you happy?" Gareth asked, his arm around Henna's waist. Henna leaned into him, solid and warm. "Yes, I did not think I could be, but I am." "Good. Because I have something to ask you." Gareth reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple wooden ring he had carved over the past month. It was not fancy, but he had poured his heart into every detail. "Henna Zalgrim, will you marry me?" Henna stared at the ring and then at him, and for a moment Gareth thought she might say no. Then she smiled, a smile so bright it rivaled the stars, and nodded. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Gareth slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed under the stars. Two people from different worlds who had found something neither had dared to hope for. The wedding was small, held on Gareth's farm with only a handful of guests. Tam Brennan officiated, because despite his initial skepticism, he had come to respect Henna. Mira the herbalist was there, along with Joran the blacksmith, the couple from the bakery, and a few others from the village who had chosen to see past old prejudices. Henna wore a simple dress that Mira had helped her sew, and Gareth wore his best shirt. They spoke their vows in both languages, human and orc, promising to love and protect each other for the rest of their lives. When Gareth kissed his bride, there were tears in Henna's eyes, and this time they were tears of joy. Life after the wedding was not perfect. There were still people in the village who refused to accept them, and there were still dangers from those who hated the peace treaty. But Gareth and Henna faced it all together, side by side, and that made all the difference. One evening, almost a year after their wedding, Henna came into the house with a strange expression on her face. Gareth looked up from the stew he was stirring, concerned. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Henna said slowly. I think I am pregnant." Gareth nearly dropped the ladle. "Are you sure?" "Not completely, but I have all the signs. I will need to see Mira to confirm," but she looked scared and hopeful at the same time. Gareth crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. "That is wonderful. That is the most wonderful news." Henna clung to him, and he felt her trembling. "I am afraid. I do not know how to be a mother. What if I am terrible at it? What if the child is rejected because of what I am?" "You are going to be an amazing mother," Gareth said fiercely. "And our child is going to be loved, by us and by anyone who matters. We will make sure of that." Henna nodded against his chest, and Gareth felt some of the tension leave her body. Mira confirmed the pregnancy a few days later, and the news spread through the village. The reactions were mixed, but Gareth noticed that more people seemed cautiously pleased than actively hostile. A child represented hope for the future, a tangible symbol that peace was possible. The pregnancy was not easy. Henna suffered from terrible nausea in the early months, and Gareth spent many nights holding her hair and rubbing her back. As her belly grew, so did her anxiety, but Gareth was always there to reassure her. Mira became a frequent visitor, checking on Henna and preparing her for what to expect. She had delivered many babies over the years, but never a half-orc child, so they were all venturing into unknown territory together. 7 months into the pregnancy, trouble came from an unexpected source. A group of orc warriors appeared at the edge of Gareth's property, armed and hostile. Gareth grabbed his bow and stepped outside, but Henna pushed past him, her hand on his arm. "Let me handle this," she said quietly. The leader of the orc group was a tall male with scars crisscrossing his face and arms. He looked at Henna with contempt. "Henna Zalgrim, the traitor, we heard you had sunk so low as to mate with a human." "What I do is my business, Crag," Henna said, her voice cold. "You have no authority over me." I was cast out, remember? You were cast out for being weak, Crag spat. And now you prove it by living among the enemy and bearing a mongrel child. Gareth's hand tightened on his bow, but Henna stepped forward, her chin high. I was cast out for refusing to kill a child. I am not ashamed of that, and I am not ashamed of my life now. Gareth is a good man, and he has shown me more honor and kindness than my own clan ever did. You disgrace your people, another orc said, a female with a shaved head and a cruel smile. My people cast me out when I was 18, Henna shot back. I owe them nothing. Now leave my land before I make you leave. Crag laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. You and what army, outcast? Her and me, said a voice behind Gareth, and he turned to see Tam Brennan approaching with a dozen armed villagers. Joran was there, along with several farmers and even the baker, all carrying weapons. This is our land, and Henna is one of ours. You orcs want trouble, you will get more than you bargained for. Crag looked at the humans, then back at Henna, and something shifted in his expression. Not respect, but perhaps a grudging acknowledgement. You have chosen your side, Henna Zalgrim. Do not think there will be a place for you among orcs ever again. I already have a place, Henna said firmly, and it is here. The orc group left without further confrontation, but the message was clear. Henna had burned her bridges with her own people, and there would be no going back. That night, Gareth held Henna as she cried, not from regret but from the finality of it. She had always known she was an outcast, but facing Crag and the others had made it real in a way it had not been before. I am sorry, Gareth whispered into her hair. I am sorry they cannot see how amazing you are. It is not your fault, Henna said, her voice thick with tears. And I do not regret my choice. I wish it did not have to be a choice. I wish the world was different. Maybe our child will help change it, Gareth said. Maybe they will be the start of something new. Henna nodded, and they held each other until the tears stopped and exhaustion pulled them into sleep. 2 months later, Henna went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth that lasted through the night and into the next day. Mira and Gareth stayed with her the entire time, and though Henna screamed and cursed and threatened to break Gareth's hand with her grip, she never gave up. When the baby finally came, squalling and healthy, Mira wrapped the infant in a clean blanket and placed the child in Henna's arms. You have a daughter, she said with a tired smile. Henna stared down at the baby and her face transformed. The baby had green-tinged skin, paler than Henna's but darker than Gareth's. She had tiny tusks that were barely visible, pointed ears like her mother, and a shock of dark hair. She was perfect. She is beautiful, Gareth said, and his voice was choked with emotion. Henna looked up at him, and there were tears streaming down her face. She is ours. They named her Hope, because that was what she represented. Hope for a future where orc and human children could grow up together. Hope that love could bridge even the widest divides. Hope that the world could change. The village welcomed Hope with a cautious warmth. People brought gifts, mostly practical things like blankets and baby clothes, but also small tokens of affection. Mira brought a carved wooden rattle. Joran made a tiny set of iron horseshoes for good luck. The baker brought a cake. Henna was overwhelmed by the kindness, and Gareth watched as she slowly began to relax into her new role as a mother. She was fiercely protective of Hope, but also tender in a way Gareth had never seen before. She sang orc lullabies in a voice so soft it made his heart ache, and she held their daughter for hours, just watching her sleep. As Hope grew, it became clear that she had inherited the best of both her parents. She was strong like her mother, quick to smile like her father, and curious about everything. She toddled around the farm, getting into everything and charming everyone she met. The village children were fascinated by her. and after some initial wariness from their parents, they were allowed to play together. Hope became a bridge between the two communities, a living proof that peace was possible. When Hope was 2 years old, Gareth and Henna received an unexpected visitor. It was an orc female, older than Henna, with gray streaking her black hair and a face marked by time and hardship. She approached the farmstead cautiously, her hands empty, and held out to show she meant no harm. Henna came out of the house with Hope on her hip, and when she saw the visitor, she froze. "Mother," the orc woman nodded, her eyes fixed on Henna. "Daughter, I have come a long way to find you." Gareth stepped up beside Henna, his hand on her back in silent support. Henna's mother looked at him, then at Hope, and her expression was unreadable. "Why are you here?" Henna asked, and her voice was cold. "To see you, to meet my granddaughter." Henna's mother took a step closer, and Gareth saw the emotion in her eyes. "And to apologize. I should have fought for you when the clan cast you out. I should have stood by you. But I was a coward, and I let them take you away. I have regretted it every day since." Henna was shaking, and Gareth took Hope from her arms so she could process this without worrying about the baby. "You let them cast me out for doing the right thing. You said I was weak and that I had shamed our family. I know, and I was wrong. You were braver than any of us, and I should have seen that." Henna's mother looked at Hope, and her face softened. "She is beautiful. What is her name?" "Hope," Henna said, and her voice cracked. "A good name. A strong name." Henna's mother looked back at Henna, and there were tears in her eyes. "I am not asking for forgiveness. I know I do not deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I am proud of you. Proud of the life you have built, proud of the woman you have become. You were right and we were wrong, and I am sorry." Henna stood frozen for a long moment, and then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her mother. They clung to each other, 2 generations of hurt and hope, and Gareth felt his own eyes sting with tears. Henna's mother stayed for 3 days, getting to know her granddaughter and rebuilding the bridge with her daughter. When she left, she promised to return and to tell others in the clan what she had seen. "Maybe," she said, "there was hope for change even among the orcs." As the years passed, Gareth and Henna's farm became a symbol of what was possible. Other mixed couples began to appear, cautiously at first, but growing bolder as they saw Gareth and Henna thriving. The village of Thornhaven became known as a place where orcs and humans could live side by side, and people came from miles around to see it for themselves. Hope grew into a bright, strong child who spoke both languages fluently and moved between the two communities with ease. She had friends among the human children and the orc children who occasionally visited with their parents. She was proof that the world was changing, slowly but surely. On Hope's 5th birthday, Gareth and Henna stood together in their wheat field, watching their daughter play with a group of children, both orc and human, their laughter ringing across the farm. Gareth's arm was around Henna's waist, and she leaned into him with the easy comfort of long practice. "Do you ever regret it?" Gareth asked. "Choosing this life, choosing me?" Henna looked up at him, and her smile was radiant. "Never, not for a single moment. Even with all the struggles, all the hate we have faced, even with all of that. Because I have you, and I have hope, and I have a life full of love. That is more than I ever dreamed possible when I was alone in the forest, bleeding and waiting to die." She reached up and cupped his face in her hand. "You saved me, Gareth, not just my life but my soul. You showed me that I was worth loving, that I deserved kindness. I will never regret choosing you." Gareth kissed her, soft and sweet, and then they turned back to watch their daughter play. The sun was warm on their faces, the wheat was golden and ready for harvest, and the future stretched out before them full of possibility. They had faced hatred and overcome it. They had faced fear and conquered it. They had built a life together that proved love, was stronger than prejudice, that hope was stronger than despair, that two people from different worlds could create something beautiful and lasting. And as they stood there, hand in hand, watching their daughter laugh and play in a world that was slowly learning to be better, they knew that every struggle had been worth it. They had found each other against all odds, and they had built a family and a future that would ripple out beyond them, changing hearts and minds one person at a time. The war was over, not just on paper but in their hearts. And in its place was something neither of them had dared to hope for when they started this journey. Love, family, and a home that welcomed everyone who came in peace. Several more years passed, and the farmstead continued to flourish. Gareth expanded the fields, and Henna took charge of breeding livestock, developing a reputation for raising the strongest and healthiest animals in the region. Hope had two younger siblings now, a brother named River who was 3, and another daughter named Dawn who had just turned 1. The house was full of noise and laughter, and the chaos that came with raising 3 energetic children. The relationship between Thornhaven and the nearby orc settlements had improved dramatically. Trade had begun between the communities, with orcs bringing furs and metalwork and humans offering grain and textiles. There were still tensions, still people on both sides who clung to old hatreds, but they were becoming the minority. Gareth had been elected to the village council, representing not just the human farmers but also the small but growing population of orcs who had chosen to settle near Thornhaven. Henna had become a mediator of sorts, someone both communities trusted to be fair and honest. She helped settle disputes, negotiated trade agreements, and taught the younger generation about respect and understanding. One autumn afternoon, as Gareth was repairing a section of fence, a rider approached on a lathered horse. It was a messenger from the regional capital, carrying official documents sealed with wax. Gareth's stomach clenched with worry as he broke the seal and read the contents. The regional governor was coming to Thornhaven to assess the integration efforts between humans and orcs. It was framed as a positive thing, a chance to showcase their success, but Gareth knew it could just as easily turn into a threat. If the governor decided their experiment was dangerous or destabilizing, he had the authority to shut it all down. Gareth found Henna in the barn, teaching Hope how to properly saddle a horse. He explained the situation, and he saw the worry flash across Henna's face before she schooled it into calm determination. "Then we show him the truth," Henna said firmly. "We show him that this works, that people can live together in peace. We have nothing to hide." The next 2 weeks were a flurry of preparation. The village was cleaned and organized. The best examples of orc-human cooperation were documented. Families who had formed friendships across species lines prepared to share their stories. Gareth and Henna made sure Hope, River, and Dawn understood the importance of the visit, though they kept the full weight of it from frightening the children. Governor Marcus Thorne arrived with an entourage of guards and officials, all of them looking skeptical and wary. He was a tall, stern man in his 50s with graying hair and cold eyes that missed nothing. Gareth and Tam Brennan greeted him officially, and then a tour of the village began. The governor inspected everything. The market where orc and human merchants sold side by side. The school where orc and human children learned together. The community center where mixed families gathered for celebrations. He asked pointed questions and took copious notes, his expression giving nothing away. When he finally came to Gareth and Henna's farm, Hope was playing in the yard with a young orc boy whose parents had settled nearby. The 2 children were building a fort out of hay bales, arguing good-naturedly about the best way to construct it. River and Dawn were napping inside, watched over by Mira, who had volunteered to help for the day. Governor Thorne watched Hope and her friend for a long moment, and then he turned to Gareth and Henna. "Your daughter is the half-orc child I have heard so much about. Her name is Hope," Henna said, her voice steady but with an edge of steel. "And yes, she is our daughter. She seems well-adjusted. Happy." "She is," Gareth said. "She has friends, she is loved, and she is growing up in a community that values her for who she is, not what she is." The governor nodded slowly. "I will be honest with you. When I received reports about Thornhaven, I expected to find chaos. Conflict barely contained. I expected to find humans living in fear and orcs plotting rebellion, but that is not what I have seen today. Because that is not what we are," Henna said. "We are people trying to build a better future. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone." Governor Thorne looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression softened. "My son died in the war. He was 19 years old, killed by an orc raiding party. I have hated your people for a decade because of that." Henna met his gaze without flinching. "I am sorry for your loss. Many on both sides lost people they loved. I lost my father and 2 brothers. But continuing to hate will not bring them back. It will only ensure more people die." "I know," the governor said quietly. "I have known it for a long time, but knowing it and accepting it are different things. Seeing this place, seeing your family, it makes me think that maybe it is time to truly accept it." He stayed for dinner, and Henna prepared a feast that mixed human and orc dishes. Hope charmed him with her endless questions and her complete lack of fear. River spilled his milk on the governor's coat, and instead of being angry, the governor laughed and said it reminded him of when his own son was young. Dawn fell asleep in the governor's arms after dinner, and he held her with the careful tenderness of someone who remembered what it was like to hold a baby. When Governor Thorne left the next morning, he shook Gareth's hand, and then, after a moment's hesitation, Henna's as well. "I am going to recommend that Thornhaven be designated as an official integration community. You will receive funding and support to continue your work, and I will be sending delegations from other regions to learn from what you have built here." Gareth felt relief crash over him like a wave. "Thank you, Governor. Do not thank me. You did the hard work. You took the risks. I am just finally smart enough to recognize success when I see it." He looked at Henna. "Your family is proof that the future does not have to look like the past. I hope more people will have the courage to follow your example." After the governor left, Henna and Gareth stood together in the yard, watching their children play. The fear and tension of the visit had melted away, replaced by hope and excitement for what came next. "We did it," Henna said softly. "We actually did it." "We did," Gareth agreed, pulling her close. "And this is just the beginning." More years passed, and Thornhaven grew from a small village into a thriving town known throughout the region for its progressive integration policies. The population swelled with both humans and orcs seeking a place where they could live without fear or hatred. Gareth and Henna's farm remained at the heart of it all, a symbol of what was possible. Hope grew into a remarkable young woman, strong and compassionate, respected by both communities. She talked about becoming a diplomat, traveling to other regions to help foster peace and understanding. River showed talent as a blacksmith, apprenticing with Joran and learning to work metal with both human and orc techniques. Dawn was still young, but she had inherited her mother's strength and her father's gentle heart, and everyone agreed she would do something special with her life. Henna's mother visited regularly now, and she had brought other orcs from her clan with her. Some stayed, some returned home but with changed perspectives. The clan that had cast Henna out had fractured, with the younger generation rejecting the old ways and seeking peace instead of endless conflict. On the 20th anniversary of the day Gareth had found Henna bleeding in the forest, they threw a celebration. The entire town turned out, humans and orcs together, filling the streets with music and laughter and food. There were speeches about unity and hope, about courage and change, but the most powerful moment came when Gareth and Henna simply stood together on a platform, holding hands, and let their presence speak for itself. This was what love looked like. This was what bravery looked like. This was what the future looked like. As the sun set and lanterns were lit across the town, Gareth and Henna slipped away from the celebration to walk through their wheat fields, just the two of them. The grain swayed in the evening breeze, golden and beautiful, and the sounds of the party drifted on the air. 20 years, Gareth said, wonder in his voice. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. Both, Henna agreed. She leaned her head on his shoulder, comfortable and content. I have lived more life in these 20 years than in all the years before combined. Any regrets? Henna laughed, the sound warm and rich. You ask me that every few years, and my answer never changes. No regrets, not a single one. They stood together as the stars came out, two people who had defied the world to build something beautiful. They had faced hatred and fear and violence, and they had overcome it all with love and stubbornness, and an unshakable belief that things could be better. Their children were proof of that belief. Their community was proof of that belief. And as more towns and villages began to follow Thornhaven's example, as more humans and orcs chose understanding over hatred, they knew their impact would ripple out far beyond what they could see. Gareth thought back to that day 20 years ago when he had followed a blood trail into the forest, not knowing it would change his life forever. He had been lonely and lost, a soldier trying to pretend he was a farmer, haunted by memories of war. And then he had found Henna, fierce and wounded and alone, and somehow they had saved each other. I love you, Gareth said, the words as true now as they had been the first time he said them. I love you too, Henna replied, turning to kiss him. Forever. Forever was a long time, but as they walked back toward their home, toward the sounds of laughter and music, toward their children and their community and the life they had built together, Gareth knew they would face it the same way they had faced everything else. Together, hand in hand, hearts beating as one. The war that had defined their world was truly over, not because the fighting had stopped, but because people like them had chosen to build bridges instead of walls. They had chosen love over hate, hope over despair, and in doing so they had changed everything. As they reached the edge of the wheat field and looked back at the town glowing with lantern light, Henna spoke one more time. Thank you. For what? Gareth asked. For seeing me. For holding me when I had forgotten what it felt like to be held. For loving me when I thought I was unlovable. For giving me a family and a home and a reason to believe in something better. Her voice was thick with emotion. You gave me everything, Gareth Ashford. You gave me everything too, Gareth said, his own voice breaking. You gave me purpose and love and a future worth fighting for. I was lost before I found you, Henna. You brought me back to life. They held each other there on the edge of the field, beneath the vast starry sky, and knew that whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together. Their love had conquered impossible odds once, and it would continue to be their strength for all the years to come. The celebration continued into the night, a testament to what they had built and what was still to come. And in the center of it all, unspoken but understood by everyone present, was the truth that Gareth and Henna had proven beyond any doubt. Love was stronger than fear. Hope was stronger than hate. And two people who chose to see each other's humanity, regardless of the differences between them, could change the world. Their story had started with blood and pain, and a desperate gamble on kindness. It had grown through shared hardship and slowly building trust, through laughter and tears and the terrifying vulnerability of admitting love. It had been tested by prejudice and violence and the weight of an entire world's expectations, and it had triumphed. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Not because they were special, but because they were willing to try. Not because the world was ready for them, but because they were ready to change the world. As the party finally wound down and guests made their way home, Gareth and Henna returned to their house where their children were already asleep, exhausted from the excitement of the day. They checked on each of them, Hope in her room with books scattered across her desk, River curled up with a half-finished metalwork project on his nightstand, and Dawn clutching her favorite stuffed bear. Then they retired to their own room, the room they had shared for 2 decades, and lay down together in the darkness. Henna's head rested on Gareth's chest, his arms wrapped around her, and they breathed in sync. "What do you think the next 20 years will bring?" Henna asked sleepily. "More of this," Gareth said. "More love, more family, more growth. More challenges too, probably, but we will handle them." "Together," Henna murmured. "Always together," Gareth agreed. And as they drifted off to sleep, secure in each other's arms and surrounded by the family they had created, they knew without a doubt that they had built something that would last. Not just for them, but for generations to come. Their love story had become a legend, told and retold throughout the region and beyond. But for Gareth and Henna, it was simply their life. The life they had chosen, the life they had fought for, the life they had built together from nothing but hope and determination and an unshakable belief in each other. It was a good life, a full life, a life worth living, and it all started with a choice. Gareth's choice to follow that blood trail and help an injured orc. Henna's choice to accept that help and let herself trust again. Their choice, again and again, to choose love over fear, understanding over hatred, and hope over despair. Those choices had changed everything. And they would continue to change everything for as long as people remembered their story and found the courage to make the same choices in their own lives. The world was different now because of them. Better, kinder, more hopeful, and that was the greatest victory of all.